Van Halen is storming the rock world in the late 1970s, dominating arenas as their groundbreaking music pulses through the hearts of a generation. David Lee Roth, the band's original frontman, is the flamboyant face of this revolution, captivating audiences with his high-flying acrobatics and dynamic energy. Roth's theatrical performances and undeniable charisma propelled Van Halen to iconic status, turning the band into a rock and roll powerhouse. But when Roth departed the band in 1985, fans were rocked. Enter Sammy HAGAR, a powerhouse singer with a strong solo career who brought his own style and substance to the group, pushing Van Halen to new commercial heights. The dynamic of the band was forever changed, setting the stage for a rivalry that would span decades and divide fans like few others. From the very beginning, Roth and HAGAR were polar opposites. Roth was a showman to the core, with a larger-than-life persona that could fill an entire stadium, his daring vocals and flamboyant stage presence a defining part of the band's image. His high-energy antics brought a raw, unpredictable edge that electrified every performance. HAGAR, on the other hand, was all about the music. Although he had his own commanding stage presence, he was focused on vocal strength, musicianship, and bringing a refined approach to the band's sound. Roth's charisma and HAGAR's vocal prowess highlighted a stark difference in their styles, a contrast that ignited fierce debate among fans. Some believed Roth was the soul of Van Halen, while others saw HAGAR as elevating the band's musicianship and expanding its horizons. This wasn't just a stylistic clash, it fueled deep-seated rivalry. With HAGAR's arrival, Van Halen's music shifted to a more polished, radio-friendly sound. Their first album with HAGAR, 5150, released in 1986, marked a notable departure from the edgier hard rock foundation Roth had helped establish. Synthesizers and polished production softened the raw edge of Van Halen, and fans took sides. For those loyal to Roth, this new sound lacked the grit and intensity they loved. HAGAR's supporters, however, argued that his sophisticated vocal range and the band's evolving sound brought a newfound musicality to Van Halen, catapulting them to greater commercial success. Over time, the simmering tension between these two fan factions would only grow as Roth and HAGAR's competition turned increasingly personal. The rivalry reached fever pitch in 2002, when Roth and HAGAR embarked on a co-headlining tour dubbed the Heavyweight Champs of Rock and Roll Tour. The tension was evident from the start, with each frontman vying for the spotlight and refusing to give ground. In interviews, HAGAR didn't hold back, openly criticizing Roth's on-stage performance. HAGAR claimed Roth wasn't drawing the same crowds and questioned his vocal ability, accusing him of being embarrassing on stage. According to HAGAR, Roth was more interested in showmanship than in delivering a strong vocal performance, a comment that stung deeply. For HAGAR, Roth's theatrics felt hollow, a smoke and mirrors display that hid what he saw as a lack of true talent. To HAGAR, Roth's commitment to chest-beating antics overshadowed the quality of the music, and he didn't shy away from expressing this opinion publicly. Meanwhile, Roth viewed HAGAR as an outsider encroaching on territory he'd carved out from the start. HAGAR's criticisms were not only an attack on his singing but on the essence of who he was as a performer. Roth's strength lay in his unapologetic flamboyance and ability to turn every show into a larger-than-life spectacle. To him, HAGAR's focus on technical precision felt clinical, lacking the wild spirit that Roth believed Van Halen embodied. Fans could feel the friction, with Roth's supporters seeing him as a true rock frontman and HAGAR's fans appreciating his polished, skilled approach. This back-and-forth tore at the band's legacy, with each man determined to prove he was the definitive voice of Van Halen. Over the years, Sammy HAGAR hasn't shied away from voicing his frustrations about David Lee Roth, not just as a performer but as a person. To the public, Roth was the quintessential rock star, magnetic, fun, and larger-than-life, with a swagger that could fill any stadium. Fans saw a man who could captivate a crowd with a grin and a high kick, someone who embodied rock and roll at its core. But according to HAGAR, the man behind that bravado was far different. HAGAR described Roth as a chest-beating figure, driven less by a love of music and more by a need to dominate those around him. He claimed that Roth's jovial, carefree image was a facade, a mask hiding a hyper-competitive individual who, behind closed doors, could be insufferable. This private side of Roth, one that HAGAR found abrasive and relentless, painted a darker picture of the Van Halen frontman. For HAGAR, the hardest part of dealing with Roth wasn't competing on stage, it was dealing with his relentless ego off stage. he saw a man constantly seeking the upper hand, someone who, in his view, prioritized his own legacy over the unity and spirit of the band. To Hagar, Roth's charisma came with a steep price, a selfishness that left little room for camaraderie. Hagar described a toxic dynamic, one in which Roth seemed bent on overshadowing everyone, not just him. This assessment stood in stark contrast to Roth's public persona as the ultimate showman, a figure who seemed to love the thrill of performing as much as his audience loved to watch. But Hagar's account suggested that Roth's need for the spotlight extended beyond the stage, making it hard for anyone else in the band to feel truly valued. In Hagar's eyes, Roth's need to outshine others was a constant. It wasn't just limited to their performances, it bled into every interaction. Roth's insistence on being the star in any setting was a quality Hagar found exhausting, a trait that seemed to sap the energy of everyone around him. Hagar felt Roth was always strategizing, looking for ways to one-up his bandmates, a personality trait Hagar found both draining and frustrating. This wasn't the kind of rock star rivalry that fans cheered on for Hagar, it was a reminder of Roth's disregard for the band's unity. For Hagar, Roth's relentless focus on his own image above all else marked the biggest rift between them. Their conflict wasn't merely about different vocal styles or stage presence, it was about fundamentally different philosophies regarding respect, collaboration, and what it meant to be part of a band. In interviews, Hagar made it clear that he saw Roth as someone who lacked genuine respect for the band and its members. For Roth, according to Hagar, the only person who truly mattered was himself. This realization only deepened the animosity between them, as Hagar couldn't reconcile Roth's rock and roll persona with the difficult reality of working with him. The rivalry wasn't just a superficial competition for the spotlight, it was rooted in Roth's relentless pursuit of self-importance, a quality that left little room for the rest of the band. For Hagar, this was the true source of their feud. Fans who had admired Roth as the ultimate frontman were confronted with a more complex, and perhaps disillusioning, side of the singer. The deep-seated rivalry between Hagar and Roth wasn't just about ego, it was a reflection of two wildly different approaches to music, fame, and loyalty that kept them at odds, even after all these years. Despite the bitterness that defined their relationship, the rivalry between David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar carved a lasting legacy into the heart of Van Halen's story. This wasn't just a band with two distinct eras, it was a rock group with two souls. Roth's era laid the foundation of Van Halen with an audacious, electric energy that defined their sound in the late 70s and early 80s. His high-energy performances, wild charisma, and daredevil attitude became Van Halen's heartbeat, captivating audiences who craved raw, rebellious rock. Hagar, stepping in after Roth's departure, brought a new layer of sophistication with a smoother, polished voice that took Van Halen to the top of the commercial charts. Hagar's era pushed the band's music to the mainstream, introducing fans to a refined sound that was both accessible and complex. For fans, these eras weren't just two chapters in Van Halen's career, they were two entirely different worlds. Roth's supporters saw him as the epitome of rock defiance, a frontman who turned every stage into his own personal arena. He was unpredictable, and his unfiltered persona gave fans a sense that anything could happen. Hagar's fans, on the other hand, valued his artistry, vocal strength, and the commercial success he brought to Van Halen. Hagar wasn't here to break the rules, he was here to elevate the game, to take the band to a level of popularity that, despite Roth's charisma, had never been reached before. This contrast between raw, untamed rock and polished, refined success cemented Van Halen as a band with a split legacy. Each era deeply beloved by its own faction of fans. Today, the question of Team Roth or Team Hagar remains a dividing line among Van Halen enthusiasts. For some, the band's true essence lies in its early years, when Roth's unpredictability brought a dangerous edge to their music. For others, Hagar's reign is the true peak, bringing mainstream recognition and transforming Van Halen into a rock powerhouse with the ability to conquer the charts. This rivalry has become a symbol of rock's competitive nature: two frontmen, two visions, two legacies within the same band. It's a rivalry that transformed the way fans connected to the music, each faction feeling a unique bond with their preferred version of Van Halen. Roth and Hagar's story isn't simply one of bitterness, it's a tale of artistic competition and evolution, a narrative of two men who, through their rivalry, elevated each other and Van Halen itself to legendary status. Roth's era will always be remembered for pushing boundaries, for its fearless dive into rock's wilder side without a second thought to restraint. Hagar's years brought a maturity and polish that proved Van Halen could evolve and stay relevant, giving fans music that reached new heights without sacrificing complexity. Together, these two chapters created a legacy that few bands can claim, a legacy where even the most intense feuds can fuel an unforgettable journey that resonates with generations.